evidence is about trial practice. That's where evidence plays out, is in the courtroom. And the courtroom is a social space. A courtroom is a space where you need to be highly attuned to your audience, the judge, your audience, the jury, your audience, your opposing counsel.
Yeah.
What is it that you're saying or putting, what happens when you're putting on evidence and opposing counsel, their leg starts like bouncing underneath. That's nervous energy. You just hit a nice spot. You've got to listen, you've got to be aware, and you've got to move gently and sort of seemingly effortlessly through the vibe of the room and be in harmony with it. And to do that, you cannot have your nose in a laptop. You just can't. And so that's why I do it.
Oh my gosh. I need to write this down. The imagery, your vocal imagery right there, that was incredible. That was just like, that was cool. Like that, I was there, and I watch a lot of Law and Order SVU. I've never thought of it like you just said. Your audience, the jury, the opposing counsel. Gosh. Okay, you're good. See, I've never sat in your class, so this is awesome. I see you. That was awesome.
There was one time, only once in the 3.5 years I was a prosecutor, but there was one time when I got a guy to confess on the stand because of being aware. So, people don't really like to lie when they're under oath and they've sworn an oath. It's not that they won't do it. I'm not saying that.
Is there anything better than a trip getting ready? Nope. For a long journey where our podcast released a new epi, searching for a fade fiending, new fixation. Giving this a subscribe is the same sensation. Started with the day ones, they gave us fuel to support the season. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here for a reason. Notification bells, text some friends, all to let you know. Check your Bluetooth, connect, talking with Donato.
Welcome in, everyone. Today's guest has one of the most unique journeys you'll ever hear. From growing up in Montana to enlisting in the Army as a truck driver, becoming a prosecutor, and now a beloved law professor and author. Known for her powerful storytelling, engaging teaching style, and bold approach to keeping law relevant. From banning laptops to referencing Jay-Z, she's reshaped how students connect with legal education. Please welcome to the show, Professor Corinna Lain.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on.
We got to get to it. And then you know what? There's a few people that I'm excited about coming on. And you know how I show that excitement? I do a little trivia and I tease them. and so if you're game, there's a couple things I want to ask you, and let's see if you get it right.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about your personal journey and background. You've had such a diverse journey from Montana to the military, then to law and teaching. What part of the path surprised even you the most?
I think looking back on it, the fact that I was a truck driver in the Army before becoming, I'm a law professor now.
Yeah.
And law professors usually have very different backgrounds than mine. And I don't know of a single law professor who, let alone a truck driver, but who was, an Army veteran, private E1 to sergeant, that sort of thing. I think I look back and go, okay, that is pretty wild.
Literally started from the bottom. Now you're here. We want to know, did you end up at the recruiter's office? They were hanging out at the lunchroom and caught you. What sent you on that path?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I remember it pretty clearly. I was in Butte, Montana. So I graduated from Butte High School, and I wanted to go to college, and my parents both supported me. You know, they were like, yep, you want to go to college, we support that. But we didn't have any money. My mom was a single mom of 3.
Oh.
And she actually she had been a secretary, and then she was a school teacher, and really couldn't make it on that little salary. And so she ended up being a card dealer. So she was a card dealer at the M&M bar in Butte, Montana. There's a shout out. And my father was a mechanic. So, I came from a very blue collar background, I would say. And I applied for the Pell Grant. I maxed out on the Pell Grant.
Yeah.
And yet looked at it and said, okay, this is the loan that you would need, even as an in-state student at University of Montana, and I can't remember exactly, but for some reason, $17,000 is in my mind, $17,000 room and board. And I had some little scholarships here and there, tuition, all of that. And, I just remember thinking, I didn't know what I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And by the way, I never met a lawyer. I never knew a lawyer. I never even met a lawyer. I didn't even meet my mom's divorce lawyers. Like, like, I don't know who those people were. So being a lawyer was really, I didn't even know what that was. In fact, here's a little point of trivia. When I applied to law school, I ended up going to University of Virginia, loved University of Virginia, but I applied to Harvard Law. And the reason I applied, and I did get in there, by the way, I didn't go, but I did get in. But the reason I applied to Harvard Law School is because when I was in Montana, I thought going to law school was going to Harvard. Like, I thought that's, I know that's like super naive. Like, what? You didn't even know there were lots of law schools, but I just thought that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that's like how far that was from me.
Yeah.
And I was folding laundry one day and a recruiter called, and so, that kind of started the path. I just happened to answer the phone, and I wasn't interested. I was like, yeah, no. And then he was like, well, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm thinking about going to college. And it was like, well, I might have to take a year. And he said, we've got the best program there is. We've got the Army GI Bill.
Yeah.
You put in 4 years. And by the way, where you been? Where have you traveled to? Because you can go all over. And I remember saying, well, I haven't been east of North Dakota. And realizing like, oh, there's a great big world out there. And I kind of want a piece of it. And in the Army, there are certain needs, that they have. And I might get the words wrong now. It's been, of course, forever. But that you could get these waivers, And so what I remember is, what were the things that the Army needed at that particular time? And there was a list, and truck driver was on it. And I could get a waiver and get Europe guaranteed.
Ooh.
And I thought, and a bonus. I got a bonus.
Oh, even better.
A signing bonus. And I thought, how in the world would a girl from Butte, Montana get to Europe? Like, that just was so fantastical. It was just such a pipe dream. I didn't even know what was there, but whatever it was, I wanted a piece of it. And so, it was the right choice for me at the right time. And I will say I have one regret about it. I'm spilling all kinds of tea for you here. But I joined the Army, and then I told my parents. I was 18.
Oh, you didn't
and
talk to them first.
Yeah, I joined first, and then
Ooh.
I told them, and I knew like that was not our family history. We were not, coming out of a military family, and I knew there would be resistance, and I'm pretty strong-willed. You may not know that about me. But and so I just decided, I'm going to do this, and it's probably better to do it and have them get mad than tell them I'm going to do it and then they tell me no.
Yeah.
And then I do it anyway and they get mad. So
Yeah.
that was my rationale, but I look back now and think, that was not honoring and respecting my mother and
Oh.
father, and but anyway, so that's kind of how that happened. And for the record, I joined for the GI Bill, but I got so much more than that. The Army gave me all these things that I didn't know I even needed for the journey that I would have. But there's no way I'd be a law professor today if I wasn't a truck driver in the Army, and if I didn't have the discipline and the drive, that the Army gave me.
I've got so many questions. We got to sit here. We got to eat here for a second here.
Right.
So wait, we talking the Army of old, with the drill sergeants and stuff we see on TV. So them running in boots and up hills and stuff. Were you an athlete? What was the physical background for you before you went to basic training? Like, tell me you were like some 6-star athlete back in Montana and you played everything.
No, I played absolutely nothing.
What?
Yeah, I played nothing, but I was a runner, and but I was not, I look back and I'm like, well, was it that I didn't have the courage, or I didn't have the confidence, or we didn't have the money to pay the athletic fees?
Yeah.
And I think if I had asked, my mom would have come up with it, but it was, clearly extra, and so what I would do, and this is so pathetic, but here we go. I would run, and a lot of times I would track my time, and then I would look in the paper and see, like, okay, how did the teams at the competition do? Yeah, what? I know, it's so sad.
Yeah,
but I did. I did.
That hurts. That just makes you think of what that barrier is. We could have had a great athlete who's competitive. I mean, you're looking, that shows you your competition level, because you're comparing yourself to the best. Because you think, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be close, or I'm not close enough, I'll get there. That all is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. Yeah. There were times where I was like, okay, I would have placed.
That's got to be frustrating.
But you know what? I get into the Army. The Army gives me this structure, right? Like, you don't have to worry about your rent. You don't have to worry about where food is coming from. You're going to the dining hall. It might not be great, but that's where you're going, and you're working out every day with the group. And I became the guidon bearer. So I was the person carrying that flag up in front of our company. Mm-hmm. And then I would turn it, and when they'd sing, and then if I got really excited, I'd run around, and I mean, I was really in it. And then I started doing long distance runs just for fun with other Army people. And so I think I placed third. I've got some trophy from a 15K that I did. And so, I did the Frankenstein Castle run in Germany, which is like the last bit of it is way up these like super grueling stairs. And, so I just, again, that was something that the Army brought in. But other than running, I did nothing. I had weak little arms. I was I was actually the Montana state champion in girls extemp speaking and debate. And so I went to nationals, which was the biggest trip I had ever been on in my life, which was in San Antonio, Texas that year. I was kicked out the first round. Like I didn't, I wasn't ready. The competition in Montana, at least at the time, was, there weren't that many kids doing speaking in Montana. Wow. But I was one of them, Yeah. So if anything, like that's where my competitive streak was in speech and debate. So, maybe a good fit for where I am now.
I'm trying to see if you're sandbagging, because I'm thinking, as a truck driver, one of the first things they taught you guys is probably how to change a tire, and you can't get tires bigger than on a truck. So what was some of that training like for you? You probably so you used leverage to try to change a tire every now and then when they asked you to, how did that go? Because in my mind, I'm thinking you're like those people at the Daytona 500, running around, picking them up and throwing them. What was that? That was kind of part of the tough stuff, right?
Yeah, it was. But by the time I got to, truck driving school, which was Fort Dix, New Jersey, I had been through basic training in South Carolina, Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Huh. And, your Montana girl who'd never been east of North Dakota going to South Carolina in the summer for basic training was such an eye-opening experience. And it was really my first exposure to, people of different color. Like, I'm just going to say there was one black guy in Butte. His name was Ace. He was a friend of mine. Like, I went to party. He was maybe 20 or something, but, I went to parties at Ace's house. But, I didn't really, there's a whole different culture. There's a whole different, all of those things I had no exposure to whatsoever. I mean, Native American culture, yes. So, but, it's not like it was just, white people, but nevertheless, I mean, that was really a thing for me. And I'll tell you, I remember a very memorable moment in basic training. I had my birthday while I was in basic. Oh. And so my mom sent me, I think it was like a bunch of cards, and I can't remember what the candies were. Well, that wasn't allowed. And and then someone had thrown a paper towel on the floor and had not, next to the wastebasket. It had missed the wastebasket and didn't pick it up. And it had rained. And the drill sergeant took us all out in our barracks and put us in push-up position. Oh. So we're all, standing there or in plank position, and said, somebody left this paper towel on the floor. Y'all are acting like pigs, so I'm going to treat you like pigs. Oh. And so you can drop. And I mean, we had to drop and roll to the left and roll to the left. And we rolled in the mud and we did push-ups. And then I had to do extra push-ups because of the package I had received, which I didn't get any of, but
thanks, Mom.
I did tell her. I was like, okay, so then everybody was finished, and then I had to do more, and I ended up falling on my face in the mud because my arms couldn't even hold it after all that. So it was a memorable birthday. But
respect, though, because you held out until you couldn't hold no more and fell flat. Respect.
I did.
That.
I did. Yeah.
I respect that. That's how you should go out.
Yeah. Well, that's how I went out that day. But, and then when I got to truck driving school, yes, there were definitely physical parts of it for sure. But they showed you how to do all that stuff. And the mechanics were more doing the heavy lifting.
Okay.
For us, it was more, getting licensed on everything from the Jeep, which is so much fun, to the deuce and a half, to the 5-ton dump truck, to the semi-tractor trailer with the double, gears that you use. And it's like, I don't know, it's kind of fun. It was fun.
Professor Lain, I gotta jump in here. It's a Lain family getaway. You guys have the SUV, the wood panel SUV. I just want the imagery. And there's a trailer on the back. Your husband's struggling. Does Sergeant Barrett come out and say, "Hey, let me go and back up this trailer"? Or you just let it be? What happens there?
No, I'm sorry, but Sergeant Barrett does come out, and it's funny that you say that, because there are moments in our home. They don't happen that often, but I don't know, something's hitting the fan and stuff has to get done. And I just start, all right, listen, we're going to do this and this and this. And my husband will turn and say, all right, Sergeant Barrett, and so, yeah. And I hate to say this, but even to this day, I love driving. So, we went and saw my daughter for Easter. She's at William and Mary. So we drove to Williamsburg, and I was like, I'm driving, we take my car. And so I'm driving. Why? Because I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's great about it.
So one last little thing was that, so that's like your first time at basic training and truck driving school. Like, I know you met a New Yorker. New Yorkers, I'm sorry, I don't do accents well. You met a New Yorker with the New York accent. You met someone from down south with a little bit of twang. What did you start smiling like, I can't believe people talk different across America? What were your thoughts there?
I have a big smile on my face right now, because I feel like it was a kid in a candy shop.
Yeah.
We were all in it together. Different people joined the Army for different reasons. Some were going towards things, some were getting away from things.
Yes.
And so you have this really eclectic group that, may not have been kind if they were with their people, but they weren't. It was just them and just me and just somebody else from somewhere else. And so we all, made friends, and it was really, I think for me, maybe there was so much built up in Montana of just like, there's this huge world out there. And so for me, it was just like, oh, I'm there.
Yeah.
In Fort Dix, New Jersey, I remember a group of us from the AIT, the Advanced Individual Training, the truck driver school. Yeah. We decided to go to Philly for the weekend or for an overnight. And we all got hotel rooms, and, the girls, but there were, guys that had their hotel rooms. We had a couple rooms that we were all sharing. Yeah. And it was the first time I saw the Liberty Bell. And it was the first time, I saw these things and just was, it was so great. And I was 18 years old, And so it's a really sweet time to be able to explore, but with a safety net there.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go back. Montana. 41st state, founded in 1889.
Sounds right. Fourth biggest state too.
What was it like growing up in Montana? Because as you know, and you saw when you got to other places, ain't nobody going to Montana. The rest of us, it's probably a flyover state, and no disrespect to you. So how do you think your upbringing influenced your worldview today?
Yeah. That's a great question. So growing up, we moved around a lot. Again, mom was single mom of 3. So, we're moving for jobs and, different apartments. We didn't own a home.
Yes.
So I lived in, we lived in Great Falls, Black Eagle, Shelby, Power, Baker, Butte. I probably have left a couple places off, but we moved a bit. I think other people I now understand have moved more, but I moved around a bit, and I don't know. I think in some ways that made me a little bit more reticent, because I was kind of always the outsider. I was always the new kid.
Yeah.
And red hair, braces, left-handed. I don't know.
Oh my God.
I had things, not an athlete, and so there was that. But I think now I look back and I am so proud of where I came from. And the people are, to this day, I will walk into a class and say good morning or good afternoon. And the very first day of class, the students are kind of surprised, because I'm just going to look at them until they say good morning back, and it's like, that's not what you do on the East Coast. You just walk by or you just start. And I'm like, no, like, I grew up in Montana, and when you pass someone on the street, you say good day, or you say hi, or you say, hi, how you doing? You're not waiting even to find out. You just, it's the greeting, and just how kind people can be on an individual level, and how hardworking those people are. When I first brought my husband back, when he came back with me to meet, my family, I remember, I think this was Shelby. And, but any event, he looked around and he said, oh, poverty with a view. And and he wasn't trying to slam it. He was right,
Right.
and it was like, yeah, we, we didn't have a lot, and rented what we had. And we were the people with the two cars, one of which was broken. The other one, the keys were always in it, because you really wouldn't want to steal it anyway. Hate to say it, dog tied up outside the yard, like, I'm just telling you, we've never done that as an adult, but, that is what I came out of. But, the values were really beautiful. And now, because that was the second part of your question, is, how does that affect you now? And I am so, so happy that I have that background, because sometimes in faculty meetings, people will be talking about this or that, and those backgrounds are generally creme de la creme backgrounds. And I can remember when COVID hit, and people were talking about, well, the professors are getting to work from home and such, and shouldn't we release the groundskeepers and a number of the people who work here on campus? And it was like, well, that's not fair. And I remember thinking, do you even know what their names are?
Oh,
because I do. I know who these people are, and I didn't say that, but I did say, if they don't work, they don't get paid. And if they don't get paid, they're going to have to go somewhere else. And so they're going to be working at McDonald's, or they're going to be working at some other place. University of Richmond is an amazing place to work, even more amazing when no one's here. And that's that's the way the university was asking for input, and that's the way they went with it. And so I'm really proud of the University of Richmond for that. But I think I am definitely at this moment in time, I guess I'm one of two people on a 45-person faculty that have some semblance of, a blue collar background.
Sure.
The other is Kurt Lash, actually, a good friend of mine, but constitutional law scholar, very highly regarded. But and so, I just think that that's really important, to stay grounded and, don't forget where you came from and what most people are. Mine is sort of an elite profession. And
I feel like you just answer it, but in your own words, since you've moved through such different spaces, military, law, academia, what threads of identity have remained consistent for you through it all?
I think one part of that is I consider it a gift that just moving in lots of different spaces has given me, is an ability to talk across the aisle and an inclination to do it.
Yeah.
I remember when the book, I know we're going to talk about that later, but, I had a hard time finding a publisher for a bit. And finally, one of them talked to me. She became my editor. Love her, Clara Platter. Shout out to her at NYU Press. But she said, you don't know who your audience is. You're really talking to conservatives in this intro. And I said, yeah, that's what I mean to do. I'm trying to talk to them because, the abolitionists, they kind of already know that things are really bad. So yeah, I want to talk to this other audience. And she turned to me and said, Corinna, they're not going to pick up a book called Secrets of the Killing State. And I was like, oh, and, I left so much of that in, so that it is receptive. And I, really peeled back on a lot of what I had to say, which I know we'll talk about that later, but I'm just saying, you see it in my work. You see it in the way I teach classes, and that I really, I don't know, I think in this polarized world and where we are especially, that's more and more rare and more important.
Agreed.
Because I do believe that good people on both sides of the aisle would agree with, some fundamental wrongs. And that's happening in and outside the death penalty space.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think information deficits
are
a big problem. So I have a big problem with a lot of media right now. I think that it's not allowing us to see multifaceted truth and to come together and talk about it. But in any event, I think that moving through those spaces, I always remember when I'm talking, well, how did you feel about the death penalty in Montana? Oh, I felt a lot differently. How did you feel about the death penalty when you were a prosecutor? I thought about this piece, and what did you see in the Army with your own eyes, by way of both racism. I was stationed in Savannah, Georgia for one of which Savannah is a very progressive city, but I was in Georgia, and also the opportunity that the Army gave different people from different places. So I think that that's a thread that has remained. And then I came to faith in the military. And I didn't come through church. That was, something that happened completely outside the church. And so that's a perspective that is not limited or molded by an institutional, formal church membership. It's a relationship between me and my God and my Savior.
Yes.
And so that, I always look and try to see someone as first and foremost, even if they're not there, but my brother or sister in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I gotta go to a moment of jest. I got
Okay.
a buddy, and my buddy says, back in the Army, basic training, part of the reason why he went to church is because they had cookies and Kool-Aid on a Sunday, and you wanted to get away from those barracks.
Ah,
For those of us that some of our listeners may not know, was that also kind of true?
yeah. I mean, I didn't come into faith until my third year of 4 years in the Army.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't going to church, not for the cookies, not for it all.
You missed it.
No, thank you. Nope. Thank you very much, but no. And then when I did have my encounter,
Yeah.
I met with the chaplain and was like, a thing happened. And, I'm like, God is real. And he's like nodding. And I'm like, no, I mean, really real. And I went out and got dunked.
Oh,
I got that. Yeah, I was like, let's go. I just, so yeah, I'm spilling all kinds of that. Like my listeners, people who know me, they'll be like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. There's all kinds of things
let's do it.
you're getting me to talk about. But yeah.
How do you think? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, so I was never really going for the cookies, because if cookies are all that could hold me, I wasn't going at all. I just buy my cookies. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I know. Shout out to Tyrone. He'll be like, oh man, you told people that, and I just gave his name. How do you think your time in the Army shaped your leadership style, both in the courtroom and the classroom?
That's great. So I made sergeant really early.
Oh.
I made sergeant. I went from E1 to E5 in 2.5 years.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Fast track.
It was really fast. It was like record fast. And part of that was, I maxed out on the physical fitness. So I had like the 300 PT score and the president.
And you wore the badge?
Yeah, I had that. I was an expert shot with the M16A1. So I could hit a pop-up target from 300 meters away. Now that came from what we call poor man's skeet out in Montana, where you're throwing up beer cans out in a field of wheat and trying to hit it.
Yeah.
Not proud of those moments, but there you go. So I had that, and then I did some competitions. So I was, battalion soldier of the month, and then soldier of the quarter, and then brigade soldier of the quarter. And yeah, I won a trip to East Berlin when I won brigade soldier of the quarter. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was really cool. We went through Checkpoint Charlie. We went into East Berlin. We stayed with the Berlin Brigade. It was very, very, very cool. So all of that is to say, I had, points from a bunch of different places. And, I don't know how the Army does it, but, maybe they had a certain quota of female truck drivers at the time. Like, I don't really know how all that worked.
Yeah.
But, maybe that I have no idea. Maybe there was something in there, the fact that I was a woman too. I don't know. But I made rank just as I moved to my second duty station in Savannah, Georgia. So I was very fortunate because I showed up as a sergeant. And so I didn't have to go through what many do have to go through when, their colleagues know them as a friend and they're an E4 specialist. And then all of a sudden they're a sergeant and they're telling people what to do. And, that can be a really rough transition.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to do that. So I got very, I was very fortunate there. But they sent me directly, no one even knew me yet. They sent me directly to PLDC, the Primary Leadership Development. I don't know. School
Course.
Course. Thank you very much.
Got it.
So I went straight to PLDC at in Georgia, and I'm trying to remember the name of that.
Fort Benning?
No, it was right outside of Savannah. It wasn't far, and it was
Fort Stewart.
Fort Stewart.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fort Stewart. There you go. And so I was in with a bunch of red berets and green berets.
What?
And it was all mixed. And that was the first time actually that I met fellow soldiers, men who were like, I don't think women should be in the military.
Oh, crap.
And at that point, I was confident. And so I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
And
here we go.
yeah. And so, I just kind of was like, well, who are you? And then I found something that I could do better than them. I could do more sit-ups than any of them in 2 minutes. So my record, I think, was like 108 in 120 seconds. It was like whoosh, 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 whoosh. And I can't do that now. I mean, like, I don't even know. Maybe I wouldn't be able to do very many sit-ups. But at the time, sadly, but like that got their respect. And then I graduated first in my class and was named Army school commandant. So then I was able to tell them what to do, and that was really fun.
Yeah.
And so one of the things people that know me have said to me is like, don't bet against me, or don't tell me I can't do something, because then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's the next thing I'm going to do,
Yeah.
So, and maybe that developed in the Army. I don't know. But so I had, I was a squad leader when I was in my second duty station. I was the barracks sergeant. And so I had pretty good leadership skills when I came out. That I think, I'm not sure how much that helped me as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of a lone wolf as a prosecutor. You've got your own cases, that sort of thing. But on a law faculty, let me tell you, lawyers and law faculty, they're very smart. I say this often, and it is true, not self-denigrating. I am not the smartest person on our faculty. Uh-huh. I'm somewhere in the bottom third. I'll outwork you, but I'm like, these people are brilliant. They really are. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they're good at doing stuff.
Right.
Like, they're good at thinking. And so the skills of being a buck sergeant, the buck stops here. You get an order that comes down that says this needs to be done. And then it makes you plan and say, oh, okay, there's going to be inspection at this time. Well, then I tell these people to be ready half an hour before then. Then I tell their leaders, I want you walking through and helping people. And then I give them the guidance, and so to be able to back up a task and say, okay, this is where you want to go. Well, let's break it down and figure out what are the steps necessary. Who are the people we need in the room? Like those, that turns out to be a pretty valuable skill on a law faculty. So I was associate dean for 6 years, and I swear to you, it was all sort of Sergeant Barrett. The difference is when you've got rank and you're in the military, people have to do what you tell them to do.
Yeah.
But in law faculty, they absolutely do not have to do anything they are told to do. If they have tenure, they can tell you to go blank yourself, and they will not lose their job and will have no repercussions whatsoever. Yeah. So it's a very different style of leadership. But even in the military, if you didn't treat the people that you are directing with respect, if you didn't explain to them, and sometimes I didn't have time, but a lot of times I did. And I would say, look, this is what's coming down. I know there's going to be a walkthrough that's a part of this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do X, Y, Z. And, when people understand what you're trying to do and you treat them as partners, because they are, they might be, E1s underneath you. They might be privates, but they're still your partner. Like if there's a mutiny, you're not getting anything done. And same with the law faculty. If there's a mutiny, you're not getting anything done. So I think that those skills have come in really handy. And then you asked about the classroom. I don't know. Your wife, who is a highly decorated soldier herself, was one of my students, one of my law students. So she could tell you better than I. I hope that my Sergeant Barrett really didn't come out in the classroom. I hope it was less directive and more, okay, here's an example though. I really like conversations. I tell my students they are public intellectuals. Like that's their job. What a great job to sit around and learn and think and to think your own ideas. You're not working for someone. You don't have the viewpoint of a client or a think tank or some litigation brief or whatever. You're just taking it in and figuring it out. And so I like to have an open environment in my classroom. Got to take care of business, TCB, got to get that out. But, I like to make space for discussion. But I have had to say from time to time, do not mistake, my openness with being a wallflower.
Ooh, yeah.
Because if you cross the line, and if I tell you that something's due and you say, she's easygoing in the classroom, I think I'll just blow that off. Oh. You're going to hear from Sergeant Barrett. Like there will be consequences. And so a couple times I've had to tell students privately, I don't, embarrass them in a classroom, but they'll do something that crosses the line and I'll take them in my office and say, don't mistake this for this. Look, I'm a former sergeant in the Army. I'm a former prosecutor. I am not someone you can walk on. I'm just not. So sometimes it comes out, but very rarely. And then I think it's sad.
Oh.
Very rarely.
Were there any pivotal moments or people that made you think, I'm going to become a professor?
Yes. And not in a very good way. I was in my first year of law school. I was in constitutional law. The law professor will not be named.
Okay.
But I was in his class and he was a brand new law professor at UVA. It was his first year. And he was terrible. He was downright terrible. He was so terrible that students started a petition to get him fired in some way. And that just goes to show you students, we don't know.
Yes.
It's that's not going to happen. Yes. But they started a petition. I did not start the petition. I did sign it. But I didn't start it. But
is that going? Okay, fine. Hold on. Okay, now pass it along.
He was terrible. And in the Army, I had spent a stint as a training NCO.
Oh.
Yep. So because I was doing the physical fitness stuff and the, carrying the guide on, and because I was hitting the, an expert shot with the M16, there was about, 6-7 months when my company commander said, hey, will you be training NCO? I wasn't even a sergeant at the time. I was a E4 specialist. But so I had done, and my mom had been a teacher. I knew how to explain to people, hey, squeeze the trigger, don't pull it, stop breathing for a second, how to teach individually. I don't know, but I remember sitting there in that 1L con law class looking at him going, shoot, I could do better than that.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's
Not knowing, of course. And when I became a law professor, I remember reading this particular law professor's Yale Law Journal article and saying, oh, that's why he's here. And I'm sure he's much better now. But
we all got to start from somewhere.
But that's really, honestly, I walked in to my faculty advisor's office as a second year law student and said, basically, how do I get your job? How does one get one of these things? And, he listed things off, and I was already a nerd. I wrote them down dutifully, and I did every one of them. I did. I published twice in law school, and I got a clerkship, and I was on the law review, and I did the things. And on my clerkship, I was talking to my judge, Judge John Porfilio, who is an amazing man, truly, truly amazing, and a great mentor. I keep in touch with him to this day, loosely.
Oh, cool.
And, I said to him, I think I'd like to get some practice first. I think I'd like to do it because the classes I liked the most were the ones where the professor didn't just talk high theory, but said, and this is what it looks like, or here's an example, or here's something that came up that was really sticky. So let's think about, this case in this context. And I loved that. I thought that really put flesh on the bones. And so I was thinking about that, and my judge said, yes. And I remember his words so clearly. He said, you need to go roll around in it. I wanted to do crim, and he said, do not apply at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Do not go to a federal level. You need to go where the people are. You need to go to a local, prosecutor or defender's office. And that's what I did.
Wow.
So I was always on teaching, and I was asked in my interview with the prosecutor's office. I remember the elected asking me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, truthfully, either here or in law teaching. That was it.
There's so much there. I almost feel like it's okay to see what right looks like and what wrong looks like, because then you know where to build from. Oh, so this is what I should not do as a first-year law professor, and build on that. That's why I asked that. I was just kind of curious, what are those moments or people? So thank you. I love that.
There was another one too.
Oh?
When I was when I was in law school, I thought for a moment, I knew I was interested in crim law. And I thought for a moment that maybe I would be a public defender.
Yeah.
My brother was involved in the juvenile delinquency system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw him go through that.
Yeah.
And there were moments of unfairness. We all have our family members that shape our worldview. And what my brother went through shaped mine. And so that first summer, I thought, maybe I'll be a defender. And I spent I went to Hutton and Williams. So I was also doing the firm thing. But I spent 3 weeks with the public defender's office thinking maybe. And in those 3 weeks, it was clear that is not for me.
Oh.
And it's not that I thought the work wasn't important. I just was like, I think it takes a very, sort of special human being to be a defender, to be a social worker, to be living in the mess of people's lives, knowing that they're going to be in that mess again.
Yes.
not appreciating you, maybe lying to you, you know, and yet do that work day after day. And I was like, yeah, that's not me. So if I were going to go into crim, that experience taught me you would need to be on the other side of the aisle. You would need to be a prosecutor. But once again, you know, and this is super important, I hope, for your listeners. You know, I now have these 20-year-old daughters.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm telling them, go have your adventure. You
Yep.
will settle down in some form or fashion. I'm not saying whether you'll, you know, get married or not, or have kids or not. Like, don't put all that on you, but you're in your 20s. Go have your adventure. This is the freest you will be. And then also, don't be afraid to make mistakes and to try things out that are like, oh, that's not for me. It wasn't a waste of time. It was not a waste of time. You picked up valuable lessons about the world or about yourself, and you put them in your backpack, and they go with you and help you as your soul, you know, is like a little homing pigeon trying to figure out, where do I belong? Where is my place? What am I supposed to be doing? So go explore. Have your, you know, don't be afraid to get it wrong. Don't be afraid to fail.
Mm-hmm. Me, and I bet some of my listeners are like, my mom ain't like that. So I hope they listen to this and realize, okay, I guess my mom she is a little different. And it's not as bad as I think.
Well, you've also got a daughter who, you know, excels at everything. And I have, you know, your family is all superstars, and, you know, people shine in their own way.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Your teaching style and philosophy, you ban laptops in your classroom. What led you to make that decision, and how do your students respond to it in 2025?
Well, so I let them have him back, but I might ban him again. So I've gone back and forth, but for, I would say, I don't know, a decade, 15 years. I'm now in my 23rd year of law teaching. I banned laptops. And here's the thing, and look, this much is true. So even now, when I let the students have a laptop, I still give them the lecture of like why the student who is taking notes by hand next to you is actually learning more and getting more out of this than you are. And so I talked to them about, you know, just there's research all the way back from Montessori. You know, Montessori schools, they teach the kids to write in cursive before they teach print. And it's because all the research shows that there's areas of your brain, even as a little kid, that are accelerated and that get excited from loopy hand movements. You know, not from the binary clickety clack or even, you know, print. So, you know, you are you're activating your brain in different ways. Also, you know, the students who are on the laptop tend to just, I mean, I'll talk and then and it's like click, 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 click. And then I stop and they're silent. And it's almost like they're stenographers. They're not listening. They're not in the moment of where we are. And so it's sad. So, you know, I'm really thinking about going back. I think I was the only person in the faculty that does it. And now, look, I record my classes. So if you can't get it, you can go back and listen to me twice.
Oh.
Lucky dogs, right?
Oh. Well, if it's recorded.
Right. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but, no problem.
But, you know, what I tell them in evidence is about trial practice. That's where evidence plays out, is in the courtroom. And the courtroom is a social space. A courtroom is a space where you need to be highly attuned to your audience, the judge, your audience, the jury, your audience, your opposing counsel. You know, what is it that you're saying or putting what happens when you're putting on evidence and opposing counsel, their leg starts like bouncing underneath. That's nervous energy. You just hit a nice spot. You've got to listen, you've got to be aware, and you've got to move gently and sort of seemingly effortlessly through the vibe of the room and be in harmony with it. And to do that, you cannot have your nose in a laptop. You can't. You just can't. And so that's why I do it.
Oh my gosh. I need to write this down. The imagery, your vocal imagery right there, that was incredible. That was just like, that was cool. Like that, I was there, and I watch a lot of Law and Order SVU. I've never thought of it like you just said. Your audience, the jury, the opposing counsel. Gosh. Okay, you're good. See, I've never sat in your class, so this is awesome. I see you. That was awesome.
There was one time, only once, in the 3.5 years I was a prosecutor, but there was one time when I got a guy to confess on the stand because of being aware. So, people don't really like to lie when they're under oath and they've sworn an oath. It's not that they won't do it. I'm not saying that. We call it test-a-lying, but they don't like to. They prefer not to.
Okay.
And so what you see are these words that are, I didn't really think XYZ, or, generally, or not really. And there's something else there, but you've got to be perceptive. You've got to be paying attention to what they say, what they don't say, the words that they say, what they do with their body. And on this particular occasion, it was breaking and entering, actually. And the defendant was on the stand, and I was cross-examining him. And I can't remember exactly how it went down, of course. This is like, I don't know, 25 years ago or so. But I asked some question, and he says, like, not really. And I said, well, let's talk about really. I mean, because really means not at all. It means just a little. So what do you mean by just a little? And he was like, well, it was kind of a jar, and then, and I said, what did you just do there with your hip? He's like, well, you just kind of nudged it with your hip. And he was like, yeah, just kind of nudged, with the hip, and it opened, and then we walked in, and the opposing counsel, he just looked at me and put his head on the table. And I was like, okay, because he just confessed to a breaking and entering. So, but you do that by having a rapport with people and not being scary.
Yep. Yeah,
right?
I can see that.
And
that's your students say you're an incredible storyteller. I just found that out. That was like a minute, 90-second riff you did. Man, we all want to come to one of your classes. Oh. What role does storytelling play in how you teach law?
I mean, I think storytelling is the greatest communication device ever. I think statistics and facts all have their place.
Yeah.
But the stories are what you remember. And the stories, I think you remember because it touches your heart. It might make you mad. It might make you sad, but stories evoke emotion. And, I think that emotion and law are intricately intertwined, whether we recognize it or not. By the way, there was a review that just came out this morning. Today is my book's birthday. It just came out, and they talked about the storytelling. in the book. So that, I'm just mentioning because I'm like, oh yeah, I do like telling stories.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
You brought Jay-Z into law discussions and had students go on police ride-alongs. Why is it important to keep legal education that hands-on and culturally relevant?
I mean, so you're talking about my criminal procedure class, and my criminal procedure class, criminal procedure is the law of police-citizen contacts. That's what it is. It's, when can they stop you? When can they pull you out of the car? When can they search you? It's Miranda rights. It's all of that stuff. And as I tell students the very first day of class, this is how, most of the American public, like 99% of the time, this is how we interact with our government. We pay our taxes, we get our marriage licenses, and everything else is the police, right? Right. We go about our business until we get stopped or something happens and we call the police, and so this is our relationship with our government. And so we should all know. And so, the criminal procedure, the law of police-citizen contacts is infiltrating into culture, whether I teach it or not. It's there, right? And so, after we finish our block of instruction on police stops and in the vehicle context, I play, 99 problems for them. And, we watch it. I have to kind of I try to get the jiggly girls. I try to cut it off right before
yes.
jiggle dance. Doesn't always work that way.
Right.
But we have fun with it. But then, we go back and we look at the lyrics.
I pulled them up.
Where he's talking about, I get pulled over because I'm going, I can't remember whether it was a mile over or 5 miles over the speed limit. Are you pulling it up now?
Yeah. So I pull over to the side of the road. I heard, son, do you know what I'm stopping you for? Because I'm young and I'm black and my hat's real low. Do I look like a mind reader, sir? I don't know. Am I under arrest or should I get some more? Well, you was doing 55 and a 54. License and registration to step out the car. Are you carrying a weapon on you? I know a lot of you are. I ain't stepping out of all my papers legit. Well, do you mind if I look around the car a bit? Well, my glove compartment is locked, so is the trunk in the back. And I know my rights, so you're going to need a warrant for that.
And aren't you sharp as that? And so I love that you just did that because that's the verse that we focus on. But it's like, can the police stop you for going 55 and a 54? Yes, they can. Can the police stop you if they have an objective reason? Dangling objects hanging from the mirror, going slightly over the speed limit. But what if their real reason is race? Does that matter? Answer, no. The Supreme Court decided in a case called Wren, WREN, that there actually is no such thing as a pretextual stop. As long as there's an objective reason for the stop, we don't look at the police motivation. And so, look, understanding how that plays out, and Jay-Z is writing about it, and it's relevant. And it's like, yeah, and you know what? It's the law that allows them to do that. And so, one of the things I talk about is police-citizen contacts have rarely been so strained in this moment. And, I understand very well the animosity, particularly in Black and brown communities. But a lot of times what I'll say is, the police are kind of like a squirrel trying to get a nut, right? Like they've got a job to do.
Yes.
It's like you put them in a maze. They're the little mouse and the cheese is on the other end. And then what the law does is lifts up all the little, blockades so that they go straight, they can do whatever they want. And then we blame the police for doing whatever they want. And that's a conversation, to have. the conversation I want to have as a law professor is, it's the law that lets them do that. Why are we only pointing at the police and not pointing at the Supreme Court that says they can?
Yeah.
You know, and I had an interrogator come into class at one point, and he was talking about how you can lie. Police can lie to suspects. They can say that we've got your fingerprints on this. We tested your DNA. Lie, flat out, intentional lie. And, you know, the person will confess, and then they'll, you know, make some argument that it was involuntary, and the court says you can lie. So, and the court upholds those and says, nah, you know, we trust that if you really didn't do it, that you would have known that was a lie. No, actually, that's not true. Especially when the police say, no, someone saw you. Well, look, there's mistaken identification. So anyway, it's just not true. But this interrogator said, well, we can lie to them. And a student raised his hand and said, I'm sorry, but I just don't think that's fair. I just don't think it's fair. Do you feel bad about that at all? And he turned to the student very professionally, very politely, and said, you might not think it's fair, but the Supreme Court says we can. You know, and that just encapsulated everything in that moment. The Supreme Court says you can. And so I think some of that accountability needs to be looking up and not just looking down. So, yeah. So, you know, and by the way, the last lines where he says, I know my rights, you know, you're going to need a warrant for that. So if it's in a car, you don't need a warrant, even if it's in your trunk. So I want everyone to know that. He got them wrong. So, you know, the students have fun picking through various, you know, things and being like, yep, this is right. And sadly, this is right. And this part is actually wrong. And, you know, get a little application in and have some fun.
Jay-Z, the radio lawyer, you got it wrong, man. You got us out here thinking we're untouchable.
Sorry.
That's untouchable. That's untouchable. But Jay-Z said.
Yeah, exactly.
What advice do you give students who want to pursue law but come from unconventional backgrounds like yours? Because you got me. I want to go study for the bar, and I want to go to law school now. And I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so I can stay with my sister for my room and board. So law school is getting a little cheaper for me.
You know, so the thing about a law degree is it's a souped up liberal arts degree. You know, you can do anything with a law degree, and there's a bunch of different professions. So a criminal law lawyer is a courtroom lawyer. That's a trial lawyer. They try cases. I loved that. And I always say criminal law is blue collar lawyering. Like you're not going to work up some case for, you know, all this time. No, you're rolling up your sleeves. You're in court every day. You're getting it done. You know, you're with the people. That's that life. You're working through lunch. I didn't have my own office. I shared an office with someone else. It didn't have a window. Wow. You know, my lunch was nabs out of the machine half the time, but I had a great time. You know, that is a different, it's so different. It's like a different profession from, you know, civil litigators that file motions all the time and have rooms of discovery and documents and do all that. And that's a different world than wills and trust people that are like living all the drama of the family and figuring out who's going to get the money and who's not. And that's different from family law that's dealing, you know, with divorce and custody. And that's different from environmental law. And so like, there's so many worlds, and any world that you're in is better. You have an advantage because you have a law degree. There's, you know, they talk about thinking like a lawyer, and thinking like a lawyer is in some ways thinking of all the things that can go wrong and how to prevent them. In other ways, it's thinking of all the ways that something else is wrong and how you can attack it. It's thinking about social change. You know, it's thinking strategy. It's understanding that the law is indelibly part of culture. The law changes. It's like the law is a formalization of culture. And so if you really want to change the law, you've got to change the culture.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but all of those insights, how to draft good laws. I've seen terrible drafting where I'm like, where are the lawyers? What were you, you know? And it's like, you don't have to be a lawyer to be a legislator. I'm like, well, you can certainly tell because this is a very poorly written law. So you can tell when they're in the room and when they're not. So I always think, particularly in today's world, where you've got people in power just kind of doing what they want. And, you know, it's the lawyers. It's the lawyers that stand up and go, not on my watch.
So my background, human resources, I've done a lot of recruiting. I've been a very successful recruiter at the executive level for some universities. I believe you are wasting away. I say this in jest, in a classroom. You have got to get out to some of those recruiting tables. The University of Richmond Law School's you've got to, if more people heard and talked with you, I think any school that's not making their quota in applications to their law school, they ain't call you in yet. Like consultation, like you could just, this is incredible. You got me ready to, I want a JD now.
You could do anything, Douglas.
And not even, maybe not even to practice, because that's the whole other part of it. You just said, I could take that degree and do whatever I want. I could apply that to my recruiting. I could apply that to human resources. Because in recruiting, sometimes, I'm not going to say I lie, but I'm going to tell you, like you kind of said earlier, there's things I might omit. Yep. I might talk around. I might distract you with. Mm-hmm. When I was an Army ROTC recruiter and a kid's like, oh, I want to go in the Navy. You know what I say to him? You know, we got more boats than the Navy, right? I'm sorry, what? Got him. And as soon as I see that, I was like, yeah, you could be in the Transportation Corps. And yeah, man, we got way more boats than them and opportunities and spaces. Yeah. Now, the difference is in the Navy, they call them ships. So was I lying? No, I'm not lying. But I just needed you to know that, there's a different way to still get to what I want. A captain of a tugboat is still a captain. And you patrol those coastal areas because it's a thin line between the Coast Guard and what we do in the Army coastally. So I could see that. Like,
I think you're a master communicator. I think you'd have a great time in law school. But, you know, I love the way you're using your talents right now, not just in this podcast, but, you know, with all of the other things you do. And I know you're in schools and you just lift people up, and that's just who you are. And so that's a beautiful thing to see.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to use this. If I find someone that's kind of lost in their direction, I'm like, not just to pitch my podcast. I'm like, hey, have you ever thought of, check this out. This lady.
Yeah. And parents love it because there's a job at the end of that. Like lawyers get jobs, you know, people go bankrupt. You need lawyers for that. You know, even in like super recessions, terrible times, it's like, you know, crime goes up in recessions. So it's just, I
want to get to be respectful of your time. Yeah. You have a big day, and it is your book birthday. If I was a better singer, I'd give you a little bit there. But
they say it's my birthday.
Tell us, what is this book that we've been speaking of?
What is this book of which you speak? The book is Secrets of the Killing State. The Untold Story of Lethal Injection. And now I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, story is even in the title. I hadn't thought about it in that way. But yeah, you know, this book is not a book where I make an argument and try to convince you that I'm right.
Yeah.
This book is a book in which I relentlessly document what states are doing in our name. And I trust that readers will, come to their own conclusions. As I say in the introduction, this is a book about how we kill, not whether we kill. Yeah. But the two questions are not unrelated. I have my own views, of course.
Yes.
But I want readers to walk with me first, and to come to their own conclusions before they ever, see mine. And, mine are like 2 lines at the very end. It's like the last 2 lines of the book. So it's like I said, it's not an argument, but, you're seeing it for yourself. And, there's a couple numbers in there, but mainly it's all stories and true stories, to show people what is happening.
How did this catch your eye? I mean, there's firing squads. I don't think we do public hangings anymore, but there's electric chairs. There's I don't know. Sorry, that's about as far as I can go when it comes to that.
That's it. Well, gassing. That you're gassing too. Which
is, gassing.
Yeah.
So why did you pick this one out of all of them?
Well, I didn't really want to write about executions at all, to be honest. I've been writing about the death penalty for over 15 years. My first piece was 2007. So yeah, it's going, and and I was working on that in 2006. So it's going on 20 years now that I've been writing on the death penalty. And I have not had an interest in looking at the execution side of it. And in fact, I famously said on a veranda, I don't want to be the lethal injection girl. We can see how that worked out. But, I really didn't want to write it. But I kept seeing this stuff in the papers about lethal injection going wrong. And one question I had that kept coming up was like, why are states so breathtakingly bad at something that we do ostensibly humanely to our pets every single day? Like, what is wrong with them? Why can't they get this, quote, right? And so, I started looking into that. And, first I tried to find someone else who had done it, and no one had. And then I was like, fine, I'll do it.
Yes, it's me.
And then it insisted upon being a book. I got somewhere in the midst of, I think, part 1 of a 3-part article, law review article, and had 300 footnotes, and said, crap, it's a book. And I set it down. I really didn't want to write on lethal injection at all. And I certainly didn't want to write a book about it. And so some other things happened. There's a whole testimony that is on my website, CorinnaLain.com. It's under the Behind the Book tab.
Okay.
So, there's a whole separate testimony, but, I prayerfully went into it and came out absolutely clear that I was the person that would write this. And when you get that kind of clarity, or at least me, when I'm asking the Lord for direction and say, look, speak clearly, and then I get a verse when I quote randomly, open a Gideon's Bible in a hotel room. And by the way, that verse is up on my, next to my computer. So I'm here, so I'll read it. It opened to Psalm 45. My heart is overflowing with a good theme. I recite my composition concerning the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. That is the page at the top left that I opened this, hotel Bible after being on my knees and saying, Lord, I don't want to write this. I don't want to do it. And here's the reasons this would be bad for me. And, but, if this is from you, then, that would just change everything. But I would need you to speak clearly, because I really don't want to do this. And then boom, I got that and was like, all right, well, it looks like I'll be writing a book on lethal injection. And, when something like that happens, or at least when it happened to me, all of the reasons I didn't want to went away. It was like, no, that I know I asked for clarity. I got clarity. This is what I'm supposed to do. And not even understanding, like, why me? Why? But I just, I knew it was what I was supposed to do. And so I set about doing it. One of the things that's interesting is that this is, so I started, that call to write came in January 2018. So this is 7 years. Some of that is, of course, a 18-month publication process, but still,
Yes.
It's a long time. But once I started it, and as I had drafts, I had other law professors saying to me, if anybody could write this in a way that can reach the public and not just other academics, like if anybody's got like a little bit of irreverence in her writing, and it's me. And I do use levity in my writing style to make this topic just a little less heavy. And there's so many ironies, and the satire is so thick that there's just a whole lot of material to choose from. So I've come to think, like, yeah, actually nobody could have written it in the way, at least in the way that I wrote it. So I hope that people do read it.
I feel like because you are a professor, Corinna Lain, you're trying to educate us. You said you're not trying to argue it. I believe you said. But if you didn't have this book, if this topic hadn't come out, it's not normal for us to go and seek out. No one says, oh, let me go read about lethal injections. Let me read this article about this last execution that happened by lethal injection from last night or 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago. That almost seems like no one really would have sought it out. So how can you do the best that you can of a topic that people don't normally go towards? And I think you answered by your constituents saying, if there's anybody that could write it, it's you, because you said you're the satire. As we've already learned, you're a great storyteller. And now I get it. And that I love the title, because we all want to hear this story now. I think that's the way you're going to get them and get us.
Well, what's interesting is, so I started this project, right? Like as a book project 7 years ago. I could never have guessed that Donald Trump would be coming into an administration, that he would issue a day one executive order saying, let's execute everybody. I mean, he literally did. And by the way, go for death whenever you can. And by the way, also go for death when you can't. Let's push the courts to let us go for death more. Okay. And let's do test cases. And, and I never could have seen that coming, but God's timing is perfect. And I never could have seen it coming that states would be so desperate for lethal injection in some of the ways that I document, that they would then go on to gas people to death, which is also a horrific death. I never could have guessed that. I never could have guessed that this book would come out on Easter. It's Tuesday, but books always, I now know, are released on Tuesdays. And so this is a Easter publication date. NYU chose it. NYU is not a religious press, but they chose it a year and a half ago. And that was well before the Pope declared Easter 2025 the year of the Jubilee, well before the Pope declared ending the death penalty as a theme of the 2025 Jubilee year. And now the Pope has just died. And so it's just like,
Yeah.
Why are people going to be interested in this? Like, well, there's this confluence of events that is, I never could have guessed, but it turns out to be pretty timely in this, just in this historical moment in time.
Oh, it is. Professor Lain, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey and insights with us. It's been a true pleasure having you on the show. Your passion for storytelling, education, making law come alive, it's truly inspiring. Best of luck with your book. It's coming out today, everyone, and we're all excited to see it make the impact that it deserves.
So, thank you. This has been an absolute joy. And, getting up today and being like, oh, as of today, I wrote a book and I'm a published author. Like, my book was born today. And so it was really, really special to spend this time with you today, to just take a moment and look back, even as we look forward, and to just, enjoy the moment. And so I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that and the space to do that. It was really, really a gift. So thank you.
It was a pleasure. And enjoy the rest of the day. Okay. This is going to be a lot of fun. I know.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, thanks for your time.
You're very welcome. Okay, bye.
Bye.